All right, YouTube, got a treat for you today. Um, Brought to you by Elizabeth Esterl. So she played on the European LPGA for a couple years when I looked her up. It was only for I think she was on for just for a few years. Um, I'm actually surprised she didn't have more success with such a mint swing. But regardless, um, I actually stumbled upon this, and I think it's actually really, really freaking good. It's probably one of the best swings I've seen on either men's or ladies. So let's kind of take a look at why it's so good and what is it that she possesses that within her swing that makes it so good, as well as some of the things that she demonstrates that are really true hallmarks of great ball strikers. So whenever you're doing any type of analysis or just looking at a swing for that matter is you gotta make sure the camera's good, the angles are good, right? That way you can draw your lines. Um, so whoever took this obviously put it on a tripod. They knew what they were doing. This swing is actually pretty old. I don't know what date. I don't know when it was, but I imagine it would probably be either near the end of her career because she's wearing these pants that she owns a clothing company, so obviously she's wearing it to promote her business. It's not high res, but it doesn't matter. We're gonna get the gist of it. So let's just take a look at this swing in real time. Great balance, really brisk, and this is a long iron, mind you. Another thing that you have to kind of notice is at the end she kind of has this funky finish. We'll go into one of the reasons why I think she has that on the caddy view. Okay, so let's take it back. So whenever you draw lines, whether or not you do it on your app, do it on this program here on the desktop version, the lines don't have to be perfect. They just need to kind of give you a reference of really what she's doing. So these are your typical lines, your tush line, and then another thing that I really want to stress is you really don't want to draw the shaft line, okay? Instead, and I learned this from watching Chuck Cook videos, is you want to start at the heel and go up near the elbow, and that's essentially what they call the shaft plane. And all good players will end up onto that shaft plane. And the reason for that is when they swing the club, if we just roll it here, we can see when she brings it back down onto this shaft plane. Okay, so she's a little bit, remember these are just approximate. Okay, the club, if we see the shaft plane is way above, or sorry, the swing plane is going to be above the shaft plane. Reason for that is good players are going to want to sole the club, right? And then there's going to be a little bit droop from the shaft. That kind of forms the shaft plane. Believe me, she's on the shaft plane, so, or sorry, on the swing plane. I always get those two mixed up. Okay, so let's kind of start here. So first thing we want to notice is we can see just that she's constantly in motion. So every good player does this, right? She's always in motion prior to starting her swing. In fact, the swing is always, it's just continuous motion. And we can see, look at her pant legs right there. It's always moving, right? Like this area, continually moving. So I'll take that away. Okay, and actually, you know what I'm actually going to do is actually take away the swing plane. Because, okay, so right about there. Okay, remember this doesn't have to be precise. You just kind of get a good reference. Okay. So she's going to start her swing right here, keeping the club outside of her hands. Very, very classic, typical. And also one thing that I want to mention too is a lot of these old school swings that you see, like the way they used to teach is they kind of teach how the club moves, and then you kind of move your body around with the club. Whereas modern instruction kind of teaches more about positions within the body positions. You know, the the body creates motion onto the club, and then you just kind of fit those things together. But back in the day, really, most people, most instructors really focused on really how the club moved. So let's kind of continue on here. So she's going to go up, keep it right, and we can see a couple things right here. I'll use a different color. Is this matches more or less with her spine angle. Okay. Most modern swings are going to have this type of look. Okay. And right there, she's up the shaft, the swing plane. You take those two lines out. You can see the club is still slightly closed. Just great turn. The only thing that I would make note of is she probably has a little bit more hip turn than your typical modern swing. But she does a good job of not overturning. You can kind of see that with this belt buckle right here, that it's not really more than 45 degrees. Okay. Take that out. Okay. And we can see that the club once again is slightly closed. It's not open. Close to the arc. Okay. And we can see once again how beautifully this is matched up with the back of her wrist. So the wrist is still slightly cupped, okay? There's actually very, very few players who actually have a super flat wrist or a bowed wrist. I think for the common folk, it's much better to just have a little bit of cup. It doesn't really matter, right? Because you can always, like, you have enough time essentially before you even start to swing to kind of get your wrist alignments in check. Okay, so we'll kind of leave that. Now, one thing you kind of notice that's a little bit different from modern swings is this arm position is a little bit above the shoulder, and which would make sense, right? As a lady golfer, you typically see these in junior golfers, lady golfers, taller golfers. They'll have their hands, kind of above the shoulder line. Helps create some leverage, makes the club a little bit lighter and easier to manage. Okay, so we don't need to be like Sergio or like a Matt Kuchar where you're just totally flat, or another example would be like your Ricky Fowler. Doesn't need to be here. Okay, so this is perfectly fine. Alright, and then we can kind of see she has that pizza tray look right there. Okay, but these things are actually not that important. What's really important is just two things. Number one, she's created some depth. Okay, so she's keeping that cheekbone along the back there. And then another thing too is, look, she's not backing up. And I'll kind of go into a little bit more detail as to why she's able to do that. Okay, and so let's bring her down. So her hands are going to come a little bit up, a little bit out, right? So as she starts right here, right? So bring it back here. Okay, so right here, when you see the hands kind of move independently of the body, okay, as you can see right here, you see she's already kind of turning into her left arm. Okay, so she's really engaging sort of what I guess you would call the core, but really specifically she's kind of rotating around her thorax, right, her thoracic spine. You can't really see from this angle, but she has a little bit of what we call thoracic tilt, where she's kind of pulling back towards this area with the back, and that's how she gets that little bit of just that extra little bit of, I guess you want to call it turn right here. So just a little bit of a stretch, boom, and she turns in. Okay, so starting to look really good. You notice tush line is on back here, maintaining depth. But more importantly, what we're going to see is her head is really staying along there, and she's lowering as well. Typical of very modern swings. Lowers even more, and then really this is start of, well, I'll go into a little bit deeper explanation of what's going on after. But as we can see, she just turns really nicely, gets, okay, so one thing I kind of want to note is look at where this club is relative to the line. So this is basically kind of, it's a little bit crossed, but not by much. Okay, not a big deal. But look at where this head is going, right? So it's kind of going this way, right, a little bit. So that would be like your typical shallowing move. You could do that with the wrist, or in this particular case, she's kind of leaving those hands up there for a little bit, just a moment, while she turns into it. And then the club does, this helicopter, what we call shallowing, okay, in quotes. Okay, so very, very typical. So all good players do this, and they'll shallow. And then, but also, this is one concept that you really have to grasp that's really, really important, is this idea of laying down the club, okay? So good players lay down the club, so they'll shallow and they'll lay down. So if you imagine that there's that the grip side, the underside of the grip right here, is slowly pointing down towards the ground, okay? And it's laying down, and then the club just kind of warps around like this, okay, in three-dimensional. And I know it's getting a little bit it's getting a little bit noisy here with all these type of lines, but let's draw this again here. Okay, so this grip end is laying down, which actually lays down the shaft, right? Right, so right here, she still actually has it quite back, which is fine. But as we can see, it gradually kind of laid down, right? It's pointing down, and once it gets to about here, because we're actually missing frames because of the video, this is where you actually start steepening. And look at this. This is just beautiful right here. Okay, on the on the back line, no, very, very little back up, and then just boom, and just great control of the club face, right? So it's going from slightly closed, and then she's going to turn it down, keep the loft. She's going to have great control over the loft. And don't forget, this is actually long iron, so it's going to take off very straight and high, right? And then right here, just the nice high finish. And we'll talk a little bit about that as well, and we can see, like, there's just so many things that are just amazing about this swing right here. We see this arm is kind of turned over, right? There's no flip, essentially. Okay, and then one thing we want to see too is still lowering, right? Like, look at this. Okay. Okay, the ball is well gone. It's still lowering right here. Really, really cool. Just great rotation. Getting these hips through. Okay, no goat humping that we see. Okay. And this is just a great looking swing. But then she kind of has this little funky finish here. And the reason for that is once we kind of look at the, and I'll show this in a different video because this is getting I don't want this video to be like 2 hours long, is in the caddy view she has great lateral movement, but she doesn't release this foot. She doesn't kind of let it slide. So that's why she kind of has to have this little, what I like to call sort of like this catch-up move, where everything kind of catches up and then she has to let go, and because she doesn't release this foot, this club just kind of goes right up behind her, and she has this little chase move, right? Like the ball's long gone, so how this looks after really here is irrelevant. Like she can let go of the club, she can stand backwards, it doesn't really matter at this point. Ball's long gone. But what we see here, hallmark of great players, and there's not too many players who actually do this. Hogan obviously does it well, Tiger does it well. Right? So I want to really highlight this area right here, this area right here, right? It's just great exit of the club. Okay. So what kind of like, so if let's just kind of go back here. So let's just pretend that this was a swing that you wanted to emulate. And believe me, this is definitely a swing you want to copy. Like how do you actually like get from here to here, right? So we talk a lot about, the L to L drills, the 9 to 3. Like how do we do this? Like what is sort of like the secret here? Or what's like the secret sauce, right? Like do you just keep your, do you put a chair right here, and or do you put your golf bag right here and try to keep your butt along that? Do you have somebody hold your head and keep it right here, like the way Jack Nicklaus did with his coach? Like, do those things actually, do you actually think those are going to make you kind of have this look, right? Do you hold leg? Do you supinate those wrists? Like what is really going on here, okay? And what I believe, and I learned this from Wayne D, is, we're going to back up just a little bit. So this is really the secret, okay? And I got to preface this by saying this move that she does it has to be trained. It has to be trained sort of by doing little shots, okay? Like literally, one-handed pitch shots, two-handed pitch shots. You're not even going from 9 to 3. You're going to do, 20-yard pitches, and you got to build this pattern into your swing. And here it is right now. And this is the magic, okay? Is right here. Is in the arm movement. Okay, so right here it's coming from high. So we see her hands coming from high to low, but she does this thing where she points, where she kind of gathers her elbow and she's pointing it more in line with this leg. Okay, so I'm going to redraw this. Okay, is this line, this leg, and really think about if you had a bottle here, and I'll put a link if I remember, and it's just brushing this. You'll see this with Jim Furyk. Gary Player does this. Sergio obviously does it as well. And that's what really is. It just, what happens is it allows you to not have to. It allows you to not have to be so timing dependent with that left wrist, where you have to really over bow it and supinate hard, right, to turn that club down. Because and I'll show you with a video later what Kerry Webb, who doesn't kind of do this, and we can see that she's way, like, she has a lot of backup move, and she's really goat humping, and that's really her only mechanism to, because of this arm movement, it's really the only way that Carrie Webb can really hit the ball. And believe me, she stripes it well as well, but this just makes it easier, and that's how you get this look. And the old timers, they really kind of figure this out, right? You watch like Ken Venturi, Ben Hogan, obviously, and they all exhibit these type of things. Gary Player, like all these old school players, they have this look where these hands are really close to the body, okay? And another thing too is, I'm going to use a different color for this to kind of demonstrate some of these concepts, is, oops, wrong one, is this bent left elbow, okay? So all good players, you know, anybody who has a single digit or low single digit or better, they're all going to have this look. And I think everybody kind of understands this concept of, if you have leg, if you're going to have any type of forward shaft lean, if you have proper leg, you're going to have your elbows a little bit bent, okay? And even if it's like a nano degree bent, you're still going to have control of the club, okay? It's not necessarily where you have to have more bent like a Dustin Johnson or Ben Hogan. You know, if you have a little bit, it's more than enough to hit good shots, like really, really good shots. And we can see right here, right at impact, she just has this, her arm is still bent, okay? Boom, and then she just let it go. And she doesn't extend until way past the ball, right, where that right elbow extends. Whereas most people, and even professionals like Ricky Fowler, their hands, or even Phil Mickelson, their hands would actually be shooting this way, right? Like it'll be going this way from this view, okay? So Chuck Cook also mentions a little bit about why this is sort of like the preferred way of swinging, is really you're kind of pulling the club in towards you, and it allows you to rotate freely, right? So as you can see, the ball's gone and she's still rotating, right? There's no stall, right? You can see at this frame, her belt is still is here. The belt is still going, still going, still going, still going, still going, still going, right? So this is a very, very free swing. Then there's no hitches. Okay, so that's really, if we want to, the main thing that we want to get from this right here is just this beautiful control of the shaft with the elbow, getting that in. And if you want to have this type of look, right, you got to have this type of pattern. And the only way to have this type of pattern is to train it. And there's a lot of drills that you can do, but you really have to start slow. And a lot of professionals actually at this point, their hands would actually be here. So, or sorry, their elbows would be here. So that would be like a Stuart Sink, Phil Mickelson, Ricky Fowler, right? And even to a certain extent, Rory. But let's really kind of take a look at this action right here. She just takes it, and then she just turns those hands in, pulls them in, and the club kind of goes out, arcs beautifully around that plane. Okay. So just great control here. Okay. And this is another hallmark of good players, is they stay underneath this swing plane, right? In order to actually be on plane, you actually have to stay off plane, and at the very last moment get on plane, right? And the swing is not a circle; it's more of a elongated, what is it called, a ellipse, right? So that's one of the mistakes that a lot of amateurs make is they try to swing the club as a circle, and you really don't want to do that because the club is not designed to do that. That's why there's offset in your in the shaft. You know, you hold the club with one hand lower than the other. So the club is actually built to never be in line with everything. Nothing really truly lines up. And that's really how you get, like, it really kind of lines up maybe about here, or in her case, maybe out here. And that's how, you know, you create leg. One part is always leading the next. Okay, so that would be sort of like your typical analysis of why this swing is so good. Shallows, right? And once she gets here, now she can just forward on and get super steep. And just puts tons of pressure onto that ball. You can see she lets her head kind of go. There's no stall. You see, everything is still going. Alright. And she's got that funky finish. And obviously you're not going to keep your head on this line, but look at this. This is just really, really good. You know, you want to pull up some old pictures of Tiger, right? That would be very, very similar. He's gonna have that type of look as well. Okay,